Gimbals, a stabilization tool that a lot of professional videographers use, which they have a reason too. Using gimbals, they provide great, smooth, dreamlike footage, but sometimes they're not always the best option, whether it be for traveling or just run and gun filmmaking. They can get tedious, let's be honest. Sometimes always having to balance the gimbal out whenever you're swapping your lens out, and the weight that it puts on your wrist when you're spending hours and hours filming, especially if you're doing weddings, man, I can only imagine. And for me personally, I always wondered if there was any other way that I could get perfect dream-like stabilized footage without having to carry around a big clunky machine. Well, let me tell you, there's a $0 product that can probably replace your gimbal and make you throw it away after this video. Let's get into it. So in this video, I'm basically gonna go over what I found, which is a $0 product that any Sony user can have and use for stabilized footage. It's called Catalytic Browse. And what Catalytic Browse is, it's a program for Sony cameras that they analyze the gyro data of your footage and they can obviously make it stabilize. And to my surprise, I was actually very shocked by how stabilized this footage can be with Catalytic Browse. Because you know, if you use the stabilization footage inside like Final Cut Pro, which is what I use, it can sometimes cause like a wobble effect. Sometimes it just looks clunky, it just looks too fake. It just, I don't know, it just doesn't always work the best. So honestly, I didn't have high hopes going into this, but it, believe it or not, blew my mind away. Now for me, this is a great stabilization that I use for a lot of my B-rolls. Now my camera, my A7S III, already has in-body stabilization built inside of it, and it works okay, but whenever I slap on this stabilization, it works like flawless. Now one thing to note when using this stabilization, always try to plan out when you're gonna use it for your shoots, because just like you know, if you're shooting 60 frames per second, you gotta have the 1/125 rule. Well, with this stabilization, you kind of want to up your shutter speed, because if you have it too low, it's going to start looking wobbly and clunky and it just doesn't look right. So if you're going to use the stabilization, up your shutter speed. So when I do that, the footage actually comes out pretty smooth and it's not all wobbly and clunky. A couple things to note when using Catalytic Browse, some issues that I ran into, because obviously it's a third party, it's not gonna be perfect, it's gonna have its flaws, it's gonna have its imperfections, so let me tell you about that. I noticed whenever my autofocus would switch focus, so say I had two people and it bounced from one person to another person, I noticed, my personal experience, that Catalytic Browse does not like that. It literally just made my footage all like digitally, it just like stuttered and it just looked like it was just, I don't know, it just didn't like it. Now I only had that issue one time, because whenever I'm focused on something, the A7S III does an amazing job, so it hardly ever loses focus. But when it did lose focus, the footage, Catalytic Browse just did not like that. But again, that was only a one-time error, so I don't know if it's something that it's just the program always does. I don't know, I haven't had it happen. Now I use this stabilization for a lot of my B-roll shots. Again, I don't use it all the time, because the A7S III in-body stabilization, whenever I rig it up, I keep it pretty smooth. I like to keep it pretty smooth off rip. I only use Catalytic Browse whenever like I have like really shaky footage of B-roll or just main footage really shaky, but I try to keep it stabilized off rip so I don't have to do it, because using Catalytic Browse is another step, another process that could slow your editing down, and for some people that can get annoying. Some people it's not even worth it. So take that into consideration. I always encourage you to try to get stabilized footage off rip. Don't really rely on these other plugins or these other softwares. Now, do I think that this stabilization could replace all gimbal work? Not really, but then yeah, but not really. Because gimbals, at the end of the day, they have their prime use. Nothing's gonna beat a gimbal than a gimbal. At the end of the day, these plugins, these third parties, they always can fail. Like I said, with the autofocus, it has issues. With a gimbal, you're not gonna have that issue unless you don't know how to balance your gimbal out. Then it'll start jerking on you and going crazy like how mine does for me. So no, I don't think the stabilization can replace gimbal work. I think gimbals will still hold their spot for all wedding videographers, commercial DPs, whatever you do video work, gimbals will hold their spot. But if you don't have a gimbal and you don't want to invest into a gimbal, or you don't want to carry around a gimbal, you could definitely get away with using this plugin. It's really, really good. Sony has not let me down. Me switching from Canon to Sony, so far all this Sony stuff that I've been learning and using and doing, and man, Sony has not let me down, and I'm loving the Sony side. I'm loving the Sony family. I still love Canon. I'm not that person that just, oh man, I'm team Sony for life. I love all cameras. If it's a good camera, it's a good camera, whatever it is. Sony so far has not let me down. I've been very, very impressed with all the functions, all the techie stuff, all the just amazing stuff that Sony has to offer. Well, that's it for today's video. I don't know why I'm standing up. I just felt like standing up because it's a beautiful day out here. It's just beautiful. It's nice, windy, but I might go film something. I might go use catalytic browse and get some stabilized footage, or I might just slap on a gimbal. I don't know yet. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. What are you doing? After this video, go film something. Get creative. I'll be on to buongiorno.